Welcome to the Flash Finds podcast, the world's fastest podcast where we explore how Facebook can help you with the stuff you're into. I'm Emma Rogue, joined by Nathan the Cat Lady, a Facebook creator. So Nathan, if you're into pets, what kind of stuff can you find on Facebook?
Well, I make reels about useful tips for pet owners. For instance, cats don't like still water, so all of my cats have cat fountains.
Oh my gosh, that's so cute. What a great episode. See you next time on the Flash Finds podcast, all about discovering the stuff on Facebook you care about. Bye.
The NBA playoffs are here, and with FanDuel, your group chat's about to be going off. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if you win. And with live bets, your heart emojis will really be racing from tip-off to the final buzzer. Plus, when you win, you'll get paid faster than your friends can send you a victory gift. Or is it GIF? Who cares? You won! So get the word out to your crew and download FanDuel today. New customers bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if you win. Make every moment more with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Official partner of the NBA.
21 plus and present in Iowa. First online real money wager only. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued is non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. See full terms at FanDuel.com/sportsbook. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-BETS-OFF.
Conservative. Constitutional. It's the Andrew Cooperrider Show, keeping you informed on what's going on right here in Kentucky.
Today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show, we see the media and the establishment reeling from the primary results, still trying to blame everything but themselves, of course, for what's gone wrong. But instead of honesty and realizing based upon a lot of evidence I'll be mentioning today and probably tomorrow, that maybe they are just fundamentally wrong, maybe they are just corrupt, maybe the people are just tired of what's been going on. No, in order to explain it, these people don't simply accept the facts that's before them. Instead, they're trying to create a universe where things make sense only, though, from their viewpoint. And we see evidence of this when we look at KET's pre-election night coverage. So this was the show they did before the primary outcome. Okay, now it's very easy post-elections to laugh at how some people got the outcomes so wrong, and to watch them talk about elections where clearly they had no idea what was going on. Even harder for me not to do it when I myself, along with Chris Weiss and Nick Nash, did a pre-election show where we made predictions, and we were just far, far, far more accurate than obviously they were, and that they ended up being. But I think it's worth noting why these people were so wrong, and how it points to the problem that's going on in the establishment and media. They're having an inability to recognize the fact that they just simply aren't the experts. Before I start going through all this, though, I want to take a second to talk about KET specifically. Specifically, its political coverage. I think KET does some good things, right? I like the fact that KET obviously makes my job easier. I like it that KET, covers the legislative session. They have cameras and cameramen in all the committee chambers and in the House chamber and Senate chambers, and they have cameras there to watch it. And so it makes it easier. You can stay up with all the hearings and everything that's going on in Frankfurt without actually having to drive down there. And I guess PBS Kids, that's another channel they have, is okay. And there's some of their programming that's okay, documentary in style. But when it comes to their political programming, specifically, it's just so bad. You'd think that since I do an hour show 5 days a week all about Kentucky politics, that KET's coverage would actually come up a lot more than it does. I'd actually be using it as fodder for shows a lot more often. I mean, yes, I bring you the news that maybe you haven't heard of, but I also bring you commentary. Like today, I'm not necessarily bringing you the news per se, but I'm bringing you commentary on things that are going on politically in Kentucky. And so the fact that KET has not one, but 2 or 3 different shows that kind of distill down a lot of the political news going on around Kentucky several times a week, you would think that that would provide me a lot of content for the show. But in a normal world, that would be accurate. But we don't live in a normal world. We live in this world. And in this world, KET's political coverage is uninteresting, inaccurate, and non-consequential. Something that they can afford to be since, they are government funded and a nonprofit funded by a variety of sources. Perhaps the reason, though, why they keep having on individuals that are just so wrong about everything and don't actually have any good insights to offer, that can't explain what's going on, or seem to not even attempt to, or they have on individuals that claim to be experts that literally their claimed expertise, you or I are more informed on, especially if you listen to this show. So, but when we look at who's funding them, that can kind of explain that, because of course, they get a lot of their funding from, obviously, the state legislature gives them a fair amount of money, and the people in charge of those budget is going to be, right now at least, the people in leadership, the establishment. Those people are making the decision on what is and how much funding is KET going to get. So there may be a natural aversion to angering them by bringing on people to talk about things that they don't really want you to cover. They're okay with the Democrats coming on because that's controlled opposition. But if you have on the anti-establishment, authentic conservative Republicans, if you have them on to talk about these elections and races and the issues, and you expose the viewers to this viewpoint, the establishment may not like that. That may affect KET's funding, of course. But also, too, we need to look at who's funding them corporately. I mean, one of their big donors is the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce. And obviously, we know that the chamber PACs in these elections we saw this primary cycle have gotten involved in a number of races. And so they're literally being funded by somebody who's turning around and funding their perceived and desirable candidates. So it becomes a question of, are you only providing the coverage you're providing in order to fulfill those corporate donors as well? And, I'm going to talk about, like I said, their pre-election night coverage. But another example of just how uninteresting and off base you get and how their show doesn't really give you a good idea of if you watch nothing but KET to learn about these elections and figure out what was going to happen, you are just shocked by the outcome. You would be just blown away. You'd be like, I didn't see this coming. Because they have on, here's an example. So earlier in the week, I think last week, 2 weeks ago, before the elections, they had on Trey Grayson and Bob Babbage. So they called this show Discussing Important Primaries Going Around the State. That's what KET called it. Discussing Important Primaries. Well, for those of you who are unaware, Bob Babbage is a registered Democrat, or at least I'm assuming so still. He was a Democrat Secretary of State. Trey Grayson was a Republican Secretary of State, ran against Rand Paul for the Senate there when Rand Paul ran the first time. And of course, we all know how that turned out. Rand Paul beat him. So Trey Grayson and Bob Babbage they have on to talk about important primaries. But what kind of special interests are they going to offer? And remember, we're talking about consequential primaries here. There isn't a single consequential Democrat primary. There just isn't. There's less than 30 total elected Democrats at the state level, period. That includes the governor. There's less than 30, or right at 30. It might be 31. I think it's right at 30. There's less than 30 or 30 elected Democrats around the state. Let's see, there's 20 in the House, there's 8 in the Senate, and the lieutenant governor and the governor. Okay, so if you count the lieutenant governor, that's 30. Okay, so there's 30 elected Democrats in the entire state, okay, at the state level. There is not a consequential primary happening, okay? It doesn't matter how they turn out. It might matter in 10 years or 20 years if they gain power again, but it doesn't matter now. They are a footnote in history at this point. Why have on Bob Babbage? What's he going to offer from his Democrat mindset, lobbyist mindset? He's got no clue what's going on in all these elections outside of course, what he's being told by his establishment uniparty friends. He's not out there knocking doors for people. He's not out there talking to candidates. He's not out there talking to the consultants about what's going on both sides of these primaries and the Republican side? Not at all. Neither is Trey Grayson. I mean, Trey Grayson, an establishment former Secretary of State who lost to Rand Paul, what insight on the Republican side is he going to offer that he isn't getting from simply reading the news? If you want interesting insights on consequential races, perhaps KET should be having on people like Trey Watson, who does go on KET a lot. He's an establishment consultant, a go-to establishment consultant. So if you want one side of the Republican primaries represented, put on Trey Watson. And then on the other side, if you want to find a consultant on the other side, put on like somebody like Sebastian Torres from Torres Consulting. I mean, you already have on nothing but political consultants most of the time. Anyways, at least have two people who are squaring off on these primaries to give you insights. Sebastian is actually the consultant on races like Thomas Jefferson. He consulted on Steve Doane and Marion Proctor. He's basically almost every race for the last 4 years where an incumbent's gone down, other than one that I can think of at the state house level, Sebastian Torres was the consultant. So have him on, or have on Chris Weiss. Like literally have on someone from the other side of the Republican divide now and then to actually inform you what's going on in the Republican divide. But that's not what they did. No, instead they continue to have on establishment hacks. We'll be going over their election pre-show after this short break, though. You're listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show.
Salute big savings this Memorial Day with Blinds.com. Upgrading window coverings can be a minor project with a major impact, and Blinds.com makes it easy. Choose premium blinds, shutters, and outdoor shades, just in time for summer fun. Get unlimited window treatments installed for one low cost, all backed by Blinds.com's 100% satisfaction guarantee. Shop Blinds.com's Memorial Day sale now for up to 50% off, plus premium doorbusters. Save up to 50% at Blinds.com. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Are you looking for a view of the world beyond the headlines? Hi, I'm Ora Ogunbiyi, host of the Weekend Intelligence podcast by The Economist. Join us to hear the stories that matter most to our reporters and writers. Every Saturday, we introduce you to people and ideas that take you outside the ordinary and expand your horizons one episode at a time. Join us and see the world from a new view. Enjoying your free access? Get more award-winning podcasts when you search Economist Podcasts and subscribe. Now save 50%. That's just $25 for the year.
And you're back here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. So KET did a pre-election night show where they talked about some races and made some predictions, and it was just awful. The cheap shots, of course, against the Liberty, authentic conservative, Liberty as they call them, conservative as I often call them, candidates, the horrible takes, the uninformed nature of some of these people just in general. It makes me wonder who is actually making the decision to have on these people over at KET. As I said, this is a pre-election night discussion, and it's easy for you to hit them on being so wrong about their predictions. As I said, Chris Weiss, Nick Nash, and myself had a discussion on this where we are a lot more accurate, but it's not as much that they were wrong that I will point out, or try not to at least point out, but it's why they were wrong. And I want to point out what they said and did so you'll be able to tell as I break down this discussion exactly why these people believe what they believe and figure out and see exactly what's wrong with, why the media and the establishment is struggling so much with these election outcomes. So I'm going to play for you here this first part. This is them introducing the people on the show. So you know who their names are, you know who the players are. Let's take a listen.
In studio by Trey Watson, Republican strategist and founder of Capital Reigns PR. Morgan Eves, executive director of the Kentucky Democratic Party. Iris Wilbur Glick, Republican consultant and founder of IW Strategies. And Jared Smith, Democratic strategist and partner at Piper Smith.
Okay, so you already know from the beginning we're in for some trouble here. So they have on Trey Watson, who runs a PAC called Common Sense Kentucky that is spending over $100,000 in many of these races. And he's also the consultant on some of these campaigns, or has consulted or informally consulted on a few of these campaigns. So obviously that's going to affect how he handles things. I mean, you literally are having on somebody to give you a take, an honest take about these elections, and you already know that kind of what they're going to say. I mean, he does have a business to run. He's got bills to pay. So what's he going to do? He's going to sit up there and say, yeah, you know, all those races I'm being paid literally tens of thousands of dollars in order to win. Yeah, I'm going to lose them all. Is he going to sit up there and say that? No, of course not. You wouldn't either if you were in his position. So you'd like to go ahead and have somebody on to maybe counterbalance what his beliefs would be. So who do they have on? Somebody who's super great? Nope, they have on a political consultant named Glick. That's her last name. It's a woman. That aligns right along with Trey, so not really interesting. Then on the Democrat side, they get the Democrat executive director, who you'll find out literally can't weigh in on any Democrat primaries at all because she's with the party. So why have her on? For her great political insights into the Republican Party politics? That is actually what she ended up talking about the entire time, of course, which, you know, we'll go into. But she's got no special or particular insights into the Republican Party politics. I mean, anybody who's heavily informed, I'm involved, obviously, on the side of Republican politics. I know a lot about what's going on because I talk to a lot of the people. But you're not going to have insider or important information on what's going on inside Republican Party primaries and Republican Party politics as the executive director of the Democrat Party of the state, because nobody's talking to you from the inside. Nobody's sharing with you great and awesome inside information. Why would they? You're the enemy. And then they also have on the Democrat side, because once again, they're so inconsequential, but we've got to have on all these people. They have on Jared Smith, who, by the way, already does a show with Trey, a podcast occasionally, but I have no clue why anyone books him for anything. Any take he has is either just like an edgier version of what Trey Watson has to say. Like Trey Watson will say something. He obviously hates the anti-establishment people, and he hates them because obviously they don't pay his bills. That's the only reason why. I mean, you're literally paid to have your opinion. That's okay. That's your job. But Jared Smith, where he is a Democrat consultant, can say exactly what Trey says about the Republican Party, but then say it edgier because, you know, he doesn't have to worry about protecting the brand of Republican. And so it's like, why even have him on at that point? It just seems absolutely not super useful because, you know, he's a Democrat. But also, he also gets a lot of things like factually wrong. Like, I've never met a consultant who's just like more wrong on things he should know. I've never met him. I've heard him rant and rave about me. So if you hear me going hard on him, it's because he has gone hard on me without me ever saying his name before. So, you know, just to let you know, he fired first, okay? He fired first. But anyways, I will just point out, he gets a lot wrong. Just a lot wrong. We'll get into that. So let's start off with, obviously, Republican primaries are the most interesting. So they go ahead and give Trey Watson some breath here. He goes on a few-minute monologue here where he's talking about quote-unquote liberty Republicans. You know, as I said, I call them often conservative Republicans. Other people call them authentic conservatives. But, you know, they like to call them liberty Republicans. Let's take a listen here.
So talk to us about liberty versus the establishment. First of all, I want you to define what is a liberty candidate. I mean, are they like a libertarian? Are they all pro-Trump? I mean, what defines a liberty candidate?
It's kind of nebulous, and I think candidates have pulled it just out of thin air and assigned it to themselves in a lot of cases. I don't know that there is a true definition you'd use for a liberty candidate. It's almost self-defined, but there is a group that have kind of lumped themselves together and said that we are liberty candidates, and they tend to be kind of an odd mix of far-right social conservative, some libertarian, but not in some cases. Like, they like liberty in some instances, but God forbid it be for a business owner or a doctor or it's a very weird mishmash of stuff. And there's also this weird streak of populism that runs through it that's not really very libertarian at all. You know, Thomas Massie is about as pure libertarian as you're going to find in Congress. A lot of these candidates are supported by Massie, but they have a little bit more of a populist and in some cases big government streak than Representative Massie has.
So let's talk about, you've got a PAC that's backing some of the more establishment Chamber of Commerce candidates, shall we say. Is that how you describe them?
I've just always said that we're back in Main Street candidates, people who are going to do what's best for businesses, for the families the businesses employ, for the state as a whole, and to kind of just be a more traditional Republican, small government, fiscal conservative, the more the traditional leave us alone caucus. We want to, whether it's guns, religion, to run our business, we just want to be left alone. You have this part of the people that call themselves liberty. There's a lot of we want to tell you what to do in that hasn't traditionally been involved in the Republican Party.
So I'm starting off with Trey Watson, who's going to attempt to define a liberty Republican. But of course, remember that this guy spends a lot of time and money trying to defeat them. Other people's money, not his money. He's paid to spend other people's money trying to defeat them. So he isn't going to be honest. He's going to try to cast them as bad as he can, as best as he can get to just making quote unquote liberty Republicans, as he calls them, look bad. So what the establishment will do, and this is what Trey's doing, is he's grabbing some small niche issues that we have a problem with, and he's extrapolating them while ignoring how the establishment actually feels about these topics and what their track record has been on it. And saying, just look, these liberty Republicans, look how inconsistent they are. Let me breaking it down when you start looking at it. Nothing what they have to say makes a lot of sense. Let's take something simple here to kind of draw you an idea. So he said that, liberty conservative Republicans like telling business owners and doctors what to do. And what Trey is trying to hit upon there, what he's trying to allude to, because I saw him making comments at the time, so I know what he's alluding to, is he's hitting upon bills to ban vaccine mandates and bills like Senate Bill 150 that told doctors they can't do sex change operations on minors. And first, to point out the view here, I want to go back to the way it was like 10 years ago. But when 10 years ago, they were sitting there and handing out the money and funding the types of people that would go on to have these discussions. They took money, they took tax dollars from us, big government spending plans that they helped enable, and on our dollar, they then turned around and taught our kids and informed the public in an attempt to try to convince us that chopping body parts off minors is like a really, really good thing. And, pushing this in public schools, all on our dollar. The other issue is that on establishment Republicans, they've seen government, they've morphed government into kind of taking over more of a parenting role. It wasn't the liberty conservative Republicans that have asked for things like mental health care in our universities, mental health care in our public K through 12 education, that have talked about how parents can't be trusted, schools have to fill in the gap more. It wasn't us, it's been them talking about that, them pushing policies to push parents out. And the reason why they push those policies is because the Chamber of Commerce, and you heard that come up there in that discussion, the Chamber of Commerce wants them pushed out, because if a parent's not very active with their kids, well, there's nothing to distract them from going to go be a cog in the machine and just working for all their giant donors, okay? And so they have pushed this big government being a parent thing. And so it becomes a real concern for people like me and probably people like you, that if we allow our tax dollars to continue funding these ideas, that chopping body parts off kids just because a boy wakes up one day and says, I'm a girl. Well, if your kid wakes up one day and says, I'm a girl who's a boy, and you say, I'm not doing that, they'll have you arrested for child abuse, something that's really happening in other states. So the unfortunate thing is they've built this big government overreach machine, and now we have to pass laws to rein it in order to stop it from violating parental rights. Now, there's other things he made about telling doctors what to do. There's a lot of hypocrisy here. We'll go over more of that. After this short break, you listen to the Andrew Cooper.
The most exciting part of a vacation stay at a home rental? Easy. It's being greeted upon arrival with a rusted lockbox affixed to the underside of a stranger's condo. Yeah, you simply twist knobs, click gears, jiggle it, and then rip it off its moorings, and voila! Your prize is a key to a questionable home rental and maybe tetanus. When you just want to get your vacation started by actually getting into your room, it matters where you stay. At Hilton, we deliver your key right to your phone on the Hilton Honors app. Hilton, for the stay.
Elevate every morning with Tommy John's Second Skin underwear. The luxurious support of Second Skin guarantees everything will go smoothly. With over 20 million pairs sold and thousands of 5-star reviews, guys love Tommy John. Plus, your most valuable assets are covered with Tommy John's best pair you'll ever wear or its free guarantee. Shop Tommy John's Friends and Family Sale right now and get 25% off site-wide at TommyJohn.com/Spotify. TommyJohn.com/Spotify. See site for details.
Cooperrider Show. And you're back here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. For the break, we are going over and played for you Trey Watson's comments on KET, where he's talking about how liberty conservative Republicans aren't really liberty, and they're all for telling businesses and doctors what to do. And I was mentioning about, on the parental side of telling parents what to do, the fact that we won't let them just chop body parts off their kids, ideas that have been funded on the expense of the taxpayer to force upon them. But on the doctor's side, telling doctors what to do, as far as, chopping the body parts off kids or telling businesses what to do. This is the other thing they like to say, is telling businesses what to do when it comes to vaccine mandates. Because the liberty conservative crowd, we wanted to pass a law saying that private employers could not mandate the COVID vaccine. Why? Because normally we wouldn't have to worry about that. But the federal government, as well as the state government, through financial incentives paid for off the back of the taxpayer, had come in and told them and created an incentive package and a culture saying, go ahead and force this shot down the throat of all your employees. It's the right and good thing to do. And so we now have to come in, because government's already taken our money. They've already done this. We now have to come in and say, no. You can't be doing that. We've got to fight back against it. That was the reasoning behind it. So talk about the reasoning behind the medical thing that he's claiming, telling doctors what to do, telling parents what to do, and also talked about, obviously, businesses what to do. And all those things have in common is that this big government machine that either Republicans like Trey Watson, like these establishment Republicans, have built, that now is being used by corrupt forces, or have stood by and watched being built by corrupt forces, are now taking our money and being used to fund against us and destroy us. And destroy things like religious liberties, destroy things like freedom of thought, destroy things like free choice, destroy the very idea that your labor is your labor, you owe it to nobody, and you should have the freedom to the fruits of your own labor. They're destroying all that. So we're saying, no, you can't. You have now told them what to do. We need to step in and tell them what to do in the opposite direction. But what's odd, though, on Watson's comment about telling doctors what to do, one of the major fights going on in the liberty versus establishment side of things is certificate of need laws, something Trey defends. And to remind you what that is, certificate of need laws, and Renee Shaw during this conversation, the host, said she doesn't understand what con is. She needs to research it. You don't need to research it a whole lot. Let me tell you, it's real simple. Hospitals cannot, and doctors cannot, and people cannot open up new facilities, add beds, or purchase significant amounts of equipment without first asking for permission from the government to do so. And the government turns around and asks, a lot of times asks, their would-be competitors, is it okay if you go ahead and open? So the regulation heavily helps those who are already operating in an area and creates a government-enforced monopoly. And that's why so many people have such a problem with con laws. And so he sits there and says, well, they're for liberty until they're telling doctors what to do. We're really for small government. Really? Because we're over here trying to get rid of con laws. And in Trey's world, telling a doctor they can't cut healthy body parts off your kid is big government, but telling doctors and hospitals you can't even come into an area and operate, you can't even buy equipment, you can't do any of these things without permission, well, that's just good and necessary governance. That's what he says. That's small government. That's leaving people alone, he claims. Like, it's obvious he's incredibly wrong. And he's wrong because he's either truly misinformed, and I don't think that's really the case. I think he's just really trying really hard to conceptualize something he cannot understand. He's paid to win these elections. He's paid to represent the establishment, and you can't be paid to constantly do that and also be a free thinker. meanwhile, too, as he claims that the mainstream Republicans are for small government, the establishment, he brings this up. He brings up about, standing against the establishment and leadership and not voting for their key pieces of legislation like the budget. I mean, they're spending 47% more adjusted for inflation than the Democrats were in 2016, the last time Democrats had control of the budget. And they made the budget for 2017 and kind of have 2018. And so 47% more in less than 10 years. And that's adjusted for inflation. Now, he did let it slip in there about how their traditional pro-business line, which he really means is cash handouts to big corporations, not like small business owners, but he's talking about giving hundreds of millions to Fortune 100 companies from the taxpayer's pocket. And it's also odd to kind of hear him say they are about leaving religion alone, because, these same people that he works for and represents, when there was a hearing on a bill about religious liberty, literally leaving religion alone, leaving people to practice the religion how they would want to, what did the establishment get worried about? Why didn't the bill move forward? Well, they were worried about it violating the fairness ordinance. The fairness ordinance that says that small businesses have to hire, people like transgender people and those types of individuals. They have to hire them, even if they have a religious objection to their lifestyle. Even if, you're operating a kid's place and you're like, look, I'm operating a Christian kid's place. I'm operating the Ark. I don't want to hire a transgender person. I don't think my clientele would really appreciate that and doesn't want that around their kids. Well, you can't say that. You can't do that under these fairness ordinances. And they were worried that a religious liberty law would violate that. But then they sit there and they're the ones defending religious. Come on now. Come on. Let's go to this next chunk here. This is Trey explaining what the problem is with some of these incumbents, liberty incumbents, that he's facing down. Let's take a listen here.
Don't those liberty identifying candidates vote with the Republican agenda, whether it's in the House or the Senate, 90+% of the time?
Sometimes, but you have a couple of candidates this cycle who I know we've been hitting, and other super PACs have been hitting as well. People like Steve Doan and Felicia Rayburn, who voted against the budget, voted against the crime package, voted against the rules, tried to propose a whole different set of rules. So, I think that's one of the things is there's room for discontent, and there's room for debate. But when you're opposing some of the signature pieces of legislation from your party in a given session, you're going to make enemies in leadership.
So now we get down to it. He's upset that they're voting against signature pieces of legislation. That's what he said, from leadership, signature pieces. And he wraps that into that's your party's signature pieces of legislation. No, that's leadership's signature pieces of legislation. And what he's hitting on is by saying normal Republican now, run of the mill, the kind of mainstream, he means is someone that just plays along, accepts the rules. Remember, he brought up the rule vote. How dare you stand against leadership on a vote to approve the rules that literally run basically your entire government when it comes to how they're going to pass laws? How dare you have an opinion on that? Right? Look, just accept a 70-something billion dollar budget with $4 billion in new debt and $26 billion in new spending. Just vote for it. Don't question it. Do as you're told. Just vote for the rules. I mean, who are you there to represent? Are you representing leadership, or are you representing your constituents? You see, here's a dirty little secret. All these normal mainstream Republicans here, and this is what's actually happened. This is why they actually hate the authentic conservatives, because forever they've been playing this game of hate the Democrats. You hate the Democrats, right? Here's what we're going to do. Put us in power. We're different than the Democrats, and let me show you all the ways. And then when they get elected, they're like, oh, never mind. We're actually not going to do that. And here comes the Liberty Republicans, as they call them, or authentic conservative Republicans. Here they come, and they're like, oh, yes, we are doing that. You see, that's why the voters are angry. You're going to hear them talk about voter turnout and how, it's grievance. They're just upset. They're just angry little people. They just bring it on. They have no policy. No, our policy is the rhetoric you've been peddling for literally years that you refuse to follow through on. You see, the establishment isn't mad at conservative liberty people for being vocal. They're mad that they don't play along in this rhetoric performance where they shell out all these talking points but put no action behind them. And when they're challenged on why this can't done, they just shrug their shoulders and say, well, there's certain people that give us a problem. I want to give you a perfect example of what I mean by when rubber meets the road, when it's time for them to actually do something, they fail. But I'm going to have to give that to you after this short break. Coming up on a break, you're listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics.
Add a berry blast off for your day with the new Berry Pebbles. A berry twist on a classic breakfast. Perfect for giving those growing minds a blast of creativity. With the new Berry Way to Pebbles. Yabba dabba do you with Berry Pebbles. Head to postpebblescereal.com to learn more. Yabba dabba do and the Flintstones and all related characters and elements, copyright and trademark Hanna-Barbera.
And you're back in this final segment here on a wonderful Monday on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. So before the break, I was talking about how we've been covering this KET conversation that we've seen going on here. KET pre-election night coverage. And they had on some just establishment hacks from both sides of the aisle. And we're just pointing out how they're so out of touch with their voters. They're so out of touch with what's going on. And they're just, for some reason, they can't accept it. And we're trying to understand why. And we can learn a lot from this conversation. And we're discovering what they're really mad at the authentic conservative, or as they call them, liberty Republicans for. And what they're mad at them for is for demanding that they follow through on the things they pretended to care about pre them being in power. The things they pretend to care about when they run for election, they just want you to go along with them that, yeah, we're going to run campaigns on this, but when it comes time to actually do something about it, we're sort of kind of maybe not, we're not going to do it, okay? And to give you the perfect example of them failing on their values here, we need but turn House Bill 11 from 2016. Now remember, this came right after Bergenfeld at the national level. And so a bill was proposed in 2016 that would exempt persons, officials, and institutions with religious objections to same-sex marriage from any requirements to solemnize such marriages. So the bill would have allowed government individuals, private persons, and institutions that have a honest and sincerely held religious objection to same-sex marriage to not have to accommodate or approve or sign off on those marriages. And the sponsors of the bill were Adia Wishner, Fisher, Beckler, Dossett, Elliott, Floyd, Hale, Heath, Huff, Himes, Kerr, King, Lee, Linder, Michael Meredith, that's important to note, Stephen Rudy, he's the, of course, floor leader for the majority leader, floor leader there in the House. And that's just to name a few. Michael Meredith, he was just in that election against, that Trey Watson here, as we're talking about, was defending. He's involved in that election there. And my point of bringing that up, House Bill 11, was that if you proposed that same bill today, if one of the liberty type people that they call liberty proposed that same bill today, they would call that an extreme thing for a liberty Republican to propose, an extremely far-right thing, out of control thing. People like Trey would say, that's not small government, and you're focusing on the social issues. You need to focus on good governance, and blah, blah, blah. I thought you're all about liberty and leaving everyone alone. And it's like, I am. I believe people should be left alone. They shouldn't be forced to violate their religious precepts because you invented. I mean, we have a right to religious freedom and a right to follow our religion that is clearly enumerated in the First Amendment of our Constitution. Nowhere in our Constitution anywhere does it say you have a right to get married. You know why it's not in there? Because our founding fathers never thought government should be involved in the process of the right to get married. In fact, the government didn't even begin to, federally speaking, recognize marriage as a legal institution until like 1913, when it was a part of their first initial tax acts and IRS codes. They literally only started recognizing it because of taxation. And yeah, there's some concern about things like, interracial marriages and in the racist South when they were worried about, marriage licenses so they could stop interracial marriages. I guess that's something I've heard people say. I guess there might be some truth to it. The other thing is that there's, blood tests have been required in some states in order to get married to make sure you're not related to one another. But all those concerns, including the taxation concern, including the concern when it comes to, even the racist one of interracial marriages, and of course the ones where you're not related, all deal with the fact that a man and woman marriage has the ability to rear children, that children will be made. But if you're going to sit there and say now that, gay people can get married too, they have a right to get married. Well, actually, the question would be, why is government involved with marriage at all now? It made some sense. They had some interest when it was a procreative one. I would argue that if I could get in a time machine, I'd say, no, you're never going to do this. You're not going to get involved into the institution of marriage as a government, if I could. But now that, though, they have, and it's like, okay, you have a right to get married, like, why are you even involving yourself, right? So, of course, the freedom to practice your religion and association, though, exists in that First Amendment, and it existed well before 2015, 9 years ago, when Obergefell decided to read into the Constitution that gay people and homosexual couples have a right to get married in exactly the same way that straight couples do. It existed well before that. And so, you could say that that's not a liberty bill. I've posted about that online. Some people try to claim that wasn't a liberty bill. They're wrong. It's about protecting the right of religion. That's what you're protecting, right? But many of the same people that Trey's defended, like Michael Meredith, as I said, they sponsored the bill. They would scoff at it. And that's because it's been a show this whole time. See, when they proposed that bill and they signed off on it, they knew it would never pass. They were in the minority and Democrats were in the majority. They didn't have to worry about it passing. So that's why people like Trey and the establishment and others hate the authentic conservative, as they call them, liberty Republicans, because they demand that all those things they promised they'd do when they got power, they actually do. Don't just serve the corporations, serve the people who elected you. But I haven't gotten around to Glick. Glick, the other Republican consultant that's sitting there, maybe she can be a counterpoint. Maybe she can provide us a counterbalance to Trey Watson's narrative. Let's take a listen here.
But for me and some of the candidates that I'll be tracking that I'm quite encouraged will be successful come tomorrow to become nominees are the type of Republicans that are interested in governing, getting something done, focusing on lowering taxes, on improving quality of life, and focus on issues like choice with public schools.
So she's not. I mean, she's obviously not a counterpoint to Watson. Let's look at her list here. Getting things done. Interesting phrase. You'll hear it often from establishment people. But what does it mean? For us liberty folk, getting things done means ending government regulations and, government overhead and spending. But to the establishment, not the case. Let's use a hypothetical example here. Okay, let's say we have an issue going on in the state where we have a shortage of barbers, people that cut your hair. Well, the establishment would dealing with the issue, they would call in the Barbers Association lobbyists, right? They wouldn't call in an actual barber on the ground. No. They'd call in the lobbyists for the Barbers Association to come in and sit down and talk to them. And then maybe bring in the board that regulates the barbers. And then they'd all sit down together and say, okay, how can we craft some sort of perfect, amazing piece of legislation to get more barbers in Kentucky? What can we change in our regulations? That's what they would do, okay? What the conservative liberty, as they call them, Republicans would do is they'd say, maybe government just doesn't regulate this at all. Like our platform says, the Republican Party platform says that government doesn't create economic opportunity, but can only hinder it. So maybe what we do is we just stop regulating barbers. That would be a great solution. Just end licensing barbers completely. It's stupid. We don't need it. And the establishment would say, hey, whoa. That's not getting things done. You just want to burn it all down. You don't stand for anything. You have no policies. You have no goals. No, I have goals. In the regulation on the things you should never be regulating in the first place is the goal. I thought you stood for small government and all that. So let's just end it. But if they end this, well, then who would pay their bills? Remember, these are the consultants. They have to make money. In order to do that, they need well-funded candidates. And where is that money going to come from? Well, it comes from the special interests that profit off government regulations. If we just cut the regulations completely, well, no longer can these individual corporations profit off government. They can't create monopolies that pad their bottom lines. So if they no longer are making profit off government, if who's your representative doesn't matter anymore, well then, what's the use of giving you candidates money? Because they're not donating out of the goodness of their hearts, they're investors. And they have nothing else to invest in. And so if candidates aren't bringing in big money, guess who doesn't get big paychecks? The political consultants. And if you ever wonder if you're on the right side or not of this, and if you're for small government, who's right, who's wrong, the people not getting a bunch of money are the ones who are right. Because nobody profits from a liberty person being in office and saying, look, all this is corrupt, all this ridiculous, it's not worth spending money. But we're not done with this conversation. We're going to continue this tomorrow on the Andrew Cooperrider Show because there's some more things that were said in this that I think are definitely worth us looking at. We'll be back here tomorrow. You all have a great rest of your day.